Next project on the list, take one, well, you wouldn't call it a GP bucket, what would we call it? I don't know. Light materials bucket, I guess. Converting it from Euro hitch to JCB lugs. I need a little bit more angle to tilt it back with. So I've cut a bit of 9mm 6x4 box section in half. I've had to knock the Euro hitch lugs off there because they're right in the way of where that needs to weld onto. I'll have to get another bit of plate, weld up there. I'll have to cut this into there to suit. The purpose of this is to build a materials auger bucket. A certain company that shall remain nameless what was it? They don't make them, they import them from France. It was a 6-month wait if I wanted one. And it was going to be $32,000. So I kind of figured I've got a big enough bucket. All I need is a auger extension. I do have it's currently on a Euro hitch challenge post hole digger for a front end loader, which can go on the telehandler as well. So the intention is take the motor end off of that, mount that up onto that end, probably bolt that on, auger through the guts, bit of pipe out the end with the auger, plate, some description. And then I shall be able to auger sand, gravel, mud rock, whatever, into both pivot wheel tracks, auger sand around the silage stacks when they're covered with plastic. Saves going around shoveling sand on by hand, because sometimes when the stacks are too close together you can't get in there even with the loader to drop sand on them, so you've only got enough room to drive up between them, not to actually be getting sideways to be tipping it out of the bucket. So I kind of figured now that we've got the pivots, a material auger bucket would be handy, but not at $32,000. It's not that handy. So for $1,400 I can get a 2.5 metre auger, 14-inch auger extension made up and shipped from Brisbane, and then I shall be able to muck around and install that. The intention is to make that end bolt on as well, then you can have a cover plate both ends, So if you just want to use it as a bucket, I can, but for the amount of times we actually use this bucket, this shall be its new purpose. Okay, so we've got the JCB lugs welded on. Extra crowd angle achieved by diagonally cutting a bit of 9mm 6x4 in half. That bit there was a bit of a nightmare to cut out. Had to plasma cut it all out. The Euro hitch lugs actually went up inside that bit of channel and were welded onto that plate up there. So we got there in the end, but yes, stage one. Got a bit of pipe. I traced a circle around the pipe on the inside, cut that out. That's a bit of a template. That one, which I sat in there and just cut that out. That was from about there around to there was easy. The last bit I had to do freehand, which wasn't so easy, but I'm sure we'll be able to patch it up if it doesn't look that good with the welder. Had to stand the bucket up to make it life easier, as long as it doesn't fall on me, which it hasn't yet. It's been standing there for a few days now since I started this process. That ring there needs holes drilled in it, cut in it, drilled in it. That ring will be welded to the pipe. Then all of that will be bolted to the outside of that, and that will form the basis of the discharge tube for the auger. So yes, that's where we're up to for the minute. Oh, God's sake. Won't give them free advertising. So I've drilled the holes in the ring, which I will now use as a template to drill the holes in the bucket so that it all bolts on. I've got to drill holes in the plate. The plate will bolt on in place of that in the event that I want to return it to a bucket for whatever reason. Everything will be able to be pulled out, unbolted. That plate bolted on there, another plate bolted on the other end. That way it'll be a bucket again. So everything's designed to be removable. Decided it would be easier to do it this way, then I can mark the holes, drill the holes, all that will line up within reason. And yeah, so I've welded the ring on. The pipe goes through the ring and just through the edge of the bucket. It'll all bolt up nicely when I do get there. It's a little bit tricky. It will be a little bit awkward, a couple of the holes, but so be it. If they're going to be too awkward, I'll rather than putting a bolt through, what I may do is drill it, tap it, and I can put a bolt through from the outside for the bottom one. We shall see. But anyway, that's where we're up to for the time being. Well, holes drilled, bolted on. The back of that one was a pain in the bum, so because the curve of the bucket virtually runs right through there and it's reinforced at the back. So I blew the guts out of it with the plasma and welded the gal nut in rather than going that way, so nut's there and bolt just bolts, screws into the nut behind it. Since there was no room at all whatsoever to get in there to do anything else, and it was an impossibility to have tapped it, so that was the easiest way. Just blew a hole in it and built it up, filled it up, and that is looking pretty fucking damn good so far. So that's the backing plate that will go the other side of the bucket. That will have the motor bolted up to it. Those 4 holes, I've got to cut a hole in the centre yet for the motor, for the front face of it. What I did here was just drilled all 5 holes, the drill press. That hole in the bucket had already been, well, it had already been punched, so I drilled a hole there. Bolted it up so that and then drilled 1 hole, punched it, drilled 1 hole, put a bolt through, and just went around and did all 4 so that they all line up. So they just need to be drilled out bigger to suit the stud pattern of the motor, and then the hole for the shaft blown in the bucket underneath, and we should be right to bolt all that on. Auger is in, one end anyway. Put the motor on, that end's in. I extended this shaft bit of 90mm pipe welded on to the end there, just to cover the internal shaft from the motor. Might help it stop chopping out seals and everything. Added a bit of flighting from about there around. Probably could have been a little bit further, but it doesn't need to be that much. But, that should help drag a little bit more out. Pin still goes in easy enough, although I had to tap it in, but we'll get there. So it's just the other end that needs the bearing and carrier and plate on, and then a couple of hoses, and then we should be good for a test run. So that's currently how we're sitting at the moment. So all in all, it hasn't worked out too bad so far. Just have to work out tomorrow how we're going to mount the bearing and the carrier, whether I mount the carrier, well, it has to bolt on so that it can all come out anyway, one way or the other. So yeah, we'll just have to see how we go. But anyway, we're getting there slowly. But yes, nice little bit of progress there today. Right, initial dry run. And I assume that's going the right way since it looks like it's pushing out that way. I just don't know yet whether I need to cut a section out of here to, I possibly will have to cut a chunk out just so that any larger pieces, if I get any rocks, can actually work their way out. Might end up having to be where the auger flighting finishes up there. Changed my mind from the 3/4 plate that I was going to use because it's just a pain in the arse to work with. So I just used a bit of 8mm, I think it is. Cut a bit of the curved stuff from where I'd cut out the circles previously, so that gave me the curve there, same in the top underneath. That just allowed me to get the 4 bolts there to mount it up with, because yeah, well, that's probably not going to work either. We will have to modify that. Four bolts won't work if I need to pull it all out. I'm just going to have to go to 2 bolts. But we'll worry about that when we have to pull it out. Or if I want to pull it out. No, it'll work. It will work, don't worry, because what I can do, this is as much for the idiot behind the camera as anyone watching. That piece will unbolt. The centre will come out so that all of that comes out of the auger shaft. And then rather than having to worry about how the hell I get the auger out, I can just undo the bolts to take the extension off and then take the auger out. So all is not lost, it will work. Just a few things to tidy up, just to clean up a bit there from the plasma and whatnot. So, other than that, just plasmaed a couple of holes in the mounting frame either side, run the hoses through. That seemed the easiest thing. I really don't know whether I might put one, the hose blocks, hydraulic hose blocks. I may put one in there just to hold it, but at this stage it's all working. So dry run working anyway. Right, a little bit of an update. Did a couple of test runs last night, and it tends to bind up. Drives too much out the chute. Where there's too much weight on the auger, if you tip the bucket right up. If you have it like this and start it, you can get it to go, but otherwise it'll stop the motor. So I ended up cutting that chunk out of the back, just so it's not pushing as much past the flighting sort of comes to there, so it gives it a space to drop rather than jamming up against that as well. School of thought was try something to take the weight off the auger, which was the required minimal amount of effort rather than altering the discharge pipe. So I just cut a bit of expandable mesh and tried that, and it worked perfectly. Didn't matter how I had the bucket, it just takes enough kick out of it. But I don't know if I'm totally happy with that idea, so what I might try next is having a bit of flat plate bent up on a, maybe not such a 90, but roughly, well, the other good thing with this, it catches all the crap too. But a bit like what you see in some spreaders and things, where the belt might have a bit of angle over it, just to cover the auger a bit. It'll still let it auger at the top and the bottom, but it'll just take all the weight off. So, and then that way, that would also stop, it'd still allow a bit bigger crap to go through. So I'm keeping this as an option. I haven't ruled this out. This was only an experiment and it worked. It didn't bind up once during that load. So, like I said, the next one will be try a bit of flat plate bent at an angle. That way I could bolt that in and have it bolted top and bottom in a couple of spots there, and whether you just do four along the top, 4 along the bottom, so that it can easily be removed. It would allow large material to still go through without bridging. So I might give that a try, see how that works before we settle on a final choice. Rightio, I give you version 3.0. Test run. We have a full bucket, as you can see, it's quite full. Probably just going to have to be shaking the bucket from now on just to get it to flow. It not once has the auger binded up or the motor hesitated. The only time it will hesitate is when you're tipping the bucket a bit, and the hydraulics will give priority to the crowd ram. So I'm calling it a success. Did take a while, but we got there. It's not exactly how I envisaged it having to be in the centre. I'll give you a look in a minute. That noise is just the UHF aerial mount too. Makes that rattly noise, so we're not falling apart. And that's only running at 65% of the hydraulic flow as well. I could chuck a fair bit more out if I wanted to. That's about the same flow that I use for the post hole digger, post banger. Following on, you can see there is absolutely bugger all dirt that was left in there. Right, go back to the shed and you can have a look. It's following on from last night's experiment with the expandable mesh. I decided that a bit of flat plate bent into a 90-degree cover, a bit like what they have in belt spreaders, just helps take the weight off. So I got one of them folded up at lunchtime and welded up some plates for it to mount on. Actually, I'll park back here in the sun so you can see better. And drilled a few holes in the bucket, which wasn't exactly the easiest. So that's basically what how it works now. It just takes the weight off the auger. And as you can see, there was very little dirt left in there, which is always going to be left in there, I would envisage, because the auger can't get right to the very bottom of the bucket anyway. So that will allow it to flow through, top or bottom. It's not quite the same that side. So that can unbolt to come out, same as everything else. So I was planning on welding lugs there and there and bolting it to the sides, but I've decided that those 6 legs will be quite sufficient. And it just makes it easier given the stud pattern of the bolts there. I had thought that I could have used that one and that one already, but it was just as easy just to do what I've done. So I'm calling it a fucking success. So I'm quite happy now.